Alright everyone, it's Hugh Sweeney here, and today I've got a video about this drone that's right in front of me, the DJI Mini 3 Pro 249 gram super lightweight, super compact drone. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a crew called DroneWorks Ireland. They're a well-known drone outfit here in Ireland, and they had just got delivery of the Mini 3, and they asked me if I'd like to do an unboxing of it. And I did unbox it, but I hadn't really a clue about the drone. So I decided to just bring it with me down to Galway here and fly this drone and see how I got on with it. Now, if you can listen here in the background, you can probably hear the bit of wind that's coming in. It's really blowing a gale out this evening. And the first evening I brought this out was a really windy evening. It was very bad. And I noticed that the drone was really being affected by the wind. So I flew it very briefly. I said it's too windy, and then I went and did a photo shoot with it in a car park, and I got some okay images as well. And even some of the images were taken by some of the famous drone websites, so that wasn't bad. Did I get any new followers on Instagram? Not really, but that's the way Instagram works these days, isn't it? But I noticed when I checked the footage that it was very, very steady. Now, I know that when you fly up high, you won't notice as much movement in the drone the further away you are from the object you're filming. But I did notice that there was no camera vibration evident at all in the image. It was super steady. And it actually did pretty well for such a small little drone. I was surprised that it handled the wind as well as it did. Yesterday I was thinking like, no way. So the gimbal and camera, as small as it is in this drone, did a fantastic job of delivering steady footage. I did think that the image was very, very crisp, very sharp, and straight out of camera it was evidently good in terms of dynamic range. Now, they have this sort of dual native ISO thing going on, which delivers a HDR image of some sort. I don't think you can switch it on or off. I just noticed that when you selected 4K in up to 30 frames per second, it says HQ beside the image. If you go up beyond that to 60, the little HQ high quality disappears. But one thing I noticed was that when I was shooting in 60 frames per second, I thought it looked as good as the 4K high quality in 24 frames per second. And I didn't notice that much difference in dynamic range. I thought 60 frames per second looked quite good. I also noticed that when I was changing from 24 frames per second to 60, that there wasn't that much change in brightness in the image. Usually when you change from 24 frames per second to 60, the image will become a lot darker, but it seemed to only get slightly darker. So that was interesting. So I thought the image looked quite good. I thought it graded well. None of the shots that I took needed that much work. I generally try and just expose it right. And the D-Cine-like profile in this takes very little work as well. You don't need to add a color transform node in DaVinci Resolve. I just literally gave it a few tweaks and I thought it looked great. So when I took this out of the box, being unfamiliar with DJI's mini drones, I couldn't believe at how light it felt. Overall, I think the build quality is fine, but you can tell that the shell, especially on the top section here, is very thin. And in fact, you can see it, how it's actually a little bit uneven, and they've given it this sort of rough texture to almost hide the variances in the plastic, because as I said, it's wafer thin. Now, I'm used to bringing around a Phantom in its styrofoam case. I even lugged this up a mountain once or twice. I think people thought I had a little mini fridge with me at one stage. So it is a luxury having something so light and powerful, and I think it's great for that. So if you haven't seen one of these drones up close, let me tell you that the camera on the front, particularly the lens, is absolutely tiny. It's an amazing feat of micro-engineering that they've managed to get such a crisp image out of that tiny little lens. It's so small. Now, looking at some of the 48 megapixel RAW files, when you zoom right in at the image, you can see up close that maybe it would be nicer if it was a little bit crisper. There's a little bit of color noise in there and a slight bit of chromatic aberration. The image distorts a small bit too at the sides. So it's not perfect, but it still is a very good, sharp image out of this small little drone. It's amazing what they've done. Now, it uses certain technology similar to mobile phones, in which it sort of turns 1 pixel into 4 pixels. Is it a true 48 megapixel sensor? I don't know. Maybe leave a comment down below in the comment section, filling me in with the details on that. Now you can take the standard 12 megapixel photographs, which are probably more than enough for most of us. The 48 megapixel images are almost 100 megabytes each, which is crazy. So you'll save a lot of space if you use the standard size, which, as I said, is probably plenty. Now, I did notice with those smaller photographs that I took that there was a very strong vignette, almost like a gradient going over the image, in which one side of it seemed to be darker than the other side. Now, that was only evident in the 12 megapixel images, not so much in the 48 megapixel ones, so I can't get my head around that, what's causing it. I'm not a huge slow-mo guy when it comes to drones, but it totally depends on the content you're shooting. If you're doing wide landscape shots and corporate videos of buildings and things like that, you generally don't use slow-mo. You're as well off just shoot at the frame rate you're going to edit at. In fact, sometimes you need to speed up drone footage, I find. But it's great to have the option of 120 frames per second if you want to shoot some nice social media content, maybe for your Instagram or your Facebook. You might want to shoot some sport or action stuff and get up close to people, and I think then 120 is great to have. So apparently it's a 1/1.3 inch sensor. What the hell does that mean? So a 1 inch sensor, firstly, is less than a quarter the size of an actual inch. The Canon APS-C sensor actually technically isn't even an inch. In fact, a full frame sensor is about an inch high. So 1 inch sensors in drones are realistically about a quarter the surface area of what a 1 inch sensor would be. Roughly about 13 millimeters by about 9 millimeters. That is what a 1 inch sensor is. This is a 1/1.3 inch sensor. So this sensor is about 9.6 millimeters by 7.2 millimeters. Roughly about 70 millimeters squared. Now a micro four thirds sensor is about 225 square millimeters. So the sensor in this is just a little bit less than a third the surface area of a micro four thirds sensor. So that is roughly the sensor size. Now it's a lot bigger than a GoPro sensor, which is only about 7 millimeters by about 5 millimeters. Now the DJI Mini 3 Pro has an f1.7 lens, which is going to be brighter than the usual f2.8 lenses that they have. I'd say making a variable aperture for that size lens would be a nightmare, so it's a fixed aperture, which is a little bit tricky when it comes to controlling the light coming into the camera. Now you can use ND filters, but I normally like to stop down a bit, even with ND filters. Depending on what way you want to shoot, if you're shooting in manual focus at f8, you might get a crisper image in case focus moves a little bit on you in autofocus mode, which it has done on me in the past. I briefly flew the drone at night time to see what it was like. I found it to be quite good in low light. I don't think I went past 1600 ISO. I did notice some smoothing on the image, which I couldn't quite get my head around. I don't really know what's going on there. Some shots I got at night were better than others, and I thought it was pretty good overall. I didn't really like how some of the highlights were blown out. Obviously with the DNG files in photography mode, you can get a little bit more latitude with your image, but I still noticed that the lights just didn't look great. It's a camera with wings at the end of the day. It shoots vertically. Shooting vertically is better than cropping a landscape photo. That's pretty obvious. You're going to get more detail. You might get more depth of field if that's the type of image you're taking, in which you have stuff at the foreground. I found myself not really shooting vertical with it that much. Anytime I shot vertical with it, I noticed that when I flipped the camera back, the composition just seemed to be just as nice. I think it could be an interesting thing for these drones to actually have a square sensor in which the camera wouldn't need to rotate at all, and when it actually wants to do landscape, it just crops in, and same with photographs. I think shooting square video could be an interesting concept as well, giving you a little bit of latitude to move the image up and down. I did notice that the lens, when facing towards the sun, was prone to flaring a little bit. It did cast a strong flare across the whole image. So you do have to watch which way you're shooting in terms of which way the sun is facing. Now let's just talk about this guy. This is the RC. They've done a great job of this. I think it's old news now that this is a very, very good addition to the package. As far as I know, you can use this now with other drones. If you have an Air 2S, you can use this. It even matches in nicely with the Air 2S. You'll get about 12 to 15 flights, I would say, out of one charge. Doesn't last as long as the Smart Controller or the RC Pro, Now the screen on it is lovely. It's adequately bright. It's not overly bright. It could do with being a bit brighter, but I thought it did a great job. And on a sunny day, I could see it, and that's kind of the main thing. It's an absolute no-brainer to get this because it's barely 200 euros more than if you got the drone on its own without that. If you got the standard controller in which you got to use your mobile phone, and it's just so much nicer having the screen and all that ready to go without arsing about with your phone. So that was great. It worked well. Now I didn't try the range a whole lot. And any kind of flying I did with just one battery, I didn't send it that far away, maybe up to 1 kilometer. I did notice it broke up the signal at one stage where I wasn't expecting it to do that, but again, I can't give you too many details. I thought the sensors worked pretty good. I hear a lot of people complaining that there's no side sensors, and side sensors would be better than back sensors. I did notice that the front sensors seemed to pick up on stuff that was a little bit to the side, so maybe the front sensors kind of work as side sensors as well. Now I'm going to be honest with you, with these drones I switched the sensors off. I haven't used sensors on a drone in a long time. I like flying really close to things. I like living on the edge. One thing I noticed with this drone was I couldn't hand catch it. So if you know how to hand catch this drone without switching off the sensors, please let me know. Every time I went in under it, it just took off. Not the biggest problem in the world, but I found myself landing it on the ground in grass a few times, in which case the props just bottomed out straight away. So find a level place when you come into land. I used the roof of my car. When I went to shoot content for the purpose of this review, I decided to go on a little mini road trip and camp overnight. And I went to some really beautiful locations. I had the opportunity here now to take a good photograph of a nice lake with mountains and trees, blue sky. So we're going to see what the quality is like. But I did something incredibly stupid. I couldn't find one of my SanDisk cards in my bag, and I used a slightly inferior card. And when I put it into the drone, I got a message on the controller saying that the card speed was slow and to change the card. But it still let me record images and it still let me take photographs. But it took a little bit longer to process the photographs. So I kind of kept using the card. I said, you know what, if it's recording, it's recording. There shouldn't be a problem. But unfortunately, when I got home and went to check the files, I couldn't retrieve them. I couldn't get them to work. I tried everything. I even tried software, special software, to recover them. So I lost 52 files, about 25 video files and about 25 photographs as well, which would have been very good to have for this review. Now I headed back to the same location to try and fill in some of the shots I got that would match up with the pieces to camera I was doing, but unfortunately the weather changed even though the forecast was good. So I just missed out on a lot of really nice shots that I got with this that I can't use, and I'm really annoyed with that. So the moral of the story is use good quality cards if you can. When I took this drone with me, I only had one battery. And it's very difficult to go out flying with a drone like this with just one battery. It's really annoying. So I ended up charging the battery in the bag as I was going. I had a little battery pack plugged into it. It doesn't charge that fast. If you use a high powered charger, I have one for the iPhone, you can get it to charge much faster, but your battery pack isn't going to charge it that fast. It's going to take a while, so you're going to need a few batteries with this. It does say 34 minutes, but if you're flying in a breeze and you're doing a little bit of flying over and back, you're going to get about 20 minutes, maybe a bit more depending on the conditions. Now in Europe here, as far as I know, you're not able to use the more powerful Battery Plus, which is a shame. On paper that says 47 minutes. I would say realistically 35 to 40 minutes. It depends again, but I think that would be a great option for anyone who has it. I don't, unfortunately. Now I'm not huge into tracking. I did try the tracking on this, and the last time I tracked was with the Mavic 2, and I found this to do a good job of keeping me in the frame. I love the lateral tracking. I had never tried that before, but just having the drone to one side keeping up with you, I thought it did a great job of that. It did veer back a little bit. It didn't keep right up, but I thought it was still pretty cool, and the way it keeps out in front of you as well was quite nice. Now there's other settings there. I'm not your guy for those spiral shots and those master shots and all that, but it's great to have those options if you were lazy and you just wanted the drone to do a bit of work for you. So who exactly is the DJI Mini 3 for? Initially, I would have thought that this was suited towards the social media user, that portrait camera, perfect for TikTok, Instagram users. But it's slightly unfair to just associate this drone with that audience. Not saying there's anything wrong with influencers, But I think this drone suits a lot of people. It's perfect for anyone who wants to keep things light. It'll fit into a very, very small footprint in your bag. So it's ideal for the traveler and the day tripper, perfect for hiking and camping. I think this is ideal because you're going to want to be packing light and you don't want to be bringing a big drone around with you. So can you use this drone professionally? That is the $64,000 question. Well, the quick answer to that is, why not? I honestly think that if you grade this down and mix it in with Mavic 3 Cine footage, that people will not tell the difference. So that says a lot. So therefore, this could be a good backup drone to a professional drone operator who uses a Mavic. So it actually kind of is capable of professional work. Now, you're not going to get hired by the BBC to go out and shoot the next Planet Earth series for David Attenborough, but those standard corporate bread and butter jobs, this is absolutely perfect for. It's a great first user's drone. If you've never owned a drone before and you want to get a drone, I think this is great. Should you get an Air 2S instead of this? Possibly. I cannot tell you the difference because I haven't used the Air 2S. Maybe the Air 2S being a little bit beefier is a better drone. Don't know. One thing I liked about this drone was how easy I found to fly it in public places. Blackrock Diving Tower, built in the 1950s. It's a lovely place to take a swim, and on a nice day you can get some cool photographs of it. I've photographed it for years, and nearly every time you fly around that tower, the people on the tower will wave to the drone, and if they don't wave to the drone, they'll still look at the drone and acknowledge that it's there. So when I was flying in front of it, I couldn't help notice that the people on top of the tower didn't see the drone. It was kind of like the movie Predator, where he's got all this clay all over him after crawling out of the water, and the predator didn't see him. They didn't see it. They didn't see the drone. I found that interesting. And then I noticed when I was flying back to me, it took ages before I actually saw the drone coming towards me. Normally I can see a drone about a half a kilometer away. It could be the color combined with the fact that the sun was out. So it's definitely a good drone if you are into those cheeky urban shots. So just to conclude, I'd like to make one little point here. All of these drones from DJI at the moment, all of these consumer drones, which are now pretty much all foldable drones because they kind of discontinued the Phantom series, seem to have the same kind of image and field of view. They all give you roughly a 24mm look. Everybody seems to love that parallax that you can get with that zoom on the new Mavic. So can you imagine if you could put a 50mm or an 85mm good quality lens on one of these small compact drones? Or better still, if it came with a zoom lens from about 15mm to about 60mm, that would be amazing. I do think the technology is there. I think they can do it. It's just a matter of when. So that is all from me on the DJI Mini 3 Pro drone. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, maybe consider subscribing in case I have other videos of interest to you. A thumbs up on the video would be great. Hit the bell as well, and better still, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of the DJI Mini 3 Pro. Is it for you or is it not? So that's all from myself, Hugh Sweeney, tonight, guys. Take care.